They told you calcium was the answer to strong bones, that you needed to take calcium supplements, drink more milk, and load up on dairy to prevent osteoporosis after 60, the supplement. Industry has made billions selling calcium pills with promises of bone protection and fracture prevention. But what if I told you that taking calcium supplements might actually be making your bones weaker, not stronger? And there's a different mineral, one that costs less and works 10 times more effectively. That's the real key to bone strength, even if you're 70, 80, or 90 years old. And doctors rarely mention it, not because it doesn't work, but because it contradicts decades of calcium-focused advice that's dominated bone health recommendations. Why? Because while everyone's been obsessed with calcium intake, they've completely ignored that calcium without this critical mineral is not only useless for bone strength, but can actually deposit in your arteries, joints, and soft tissues, causing more harm than good. And if you're over 60, every supplement choice you make either builds genuinely strong bones or creates a dangerous calcium imbalance that accelerates aging and disease. Today, I'm going to reveal exactly what this bone-building mineral is, why it's 10 times more effective than calcium for actual bone strength and fracture prevention, and how to get enough of it through simple, inexpensive food sources that work better than any supplement. Stay with me until the end, because I'll give you the exact daily amount you need, the best food sources, and why combining it correctly can reverse bone loss even when calcium alone has failed. But before I expose the mineral that could save you from fractures and osteoporosis, if you're serious about building genuinely strong bones without wasting money on ineffective supplements, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel for daily evidence-based strategies that challenge conventional wisdom and actually work for seniors. And comment below telling me, are you currently taking calcium supplements? And have they actually improved your bone density? Let's talk about the truth. Let's start with the uncomfortable reality about calcium supplements that the supplement industry doesn't want you to know. For decades, doctors have been prescribing calcium supplements, usually 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams per day, to postmenopausal women and older adults to prevent osteoporosis. The logic seemed sound. Bones are made of calcium, so if you consume more calcium, your bones should get stronger. But here's what the research actually shows, and it's shocking. Multiple large-scale studies over the past 15 years have found that calcium supplementation does not significantly reduce fracture risk in elderly populations. In fact, some studies show that high-dose calcium supplements may actually increase the risk of heart attacks, strokes, and kidney stones, while doing little to nothing for bone strength. One landmark study published in the British Medical Journal followed over 60,000 women for 19 years and found that those taking calcium supplements had no reduction in fracture risk compared to those who didn't supplement, but they did have higher rates of cardiovascular events. Why doesn't calcium supplementation work the way we thought it would? Because bones aren't just calcium storage units. They're living, dynamic tissue made up of a complex protein matrix, primarily collagen, that's mineralized with calcium and phosphorus. Think of bone like reinforced concrete. The collagen is the steel rebar framework that gives bone its flexibility and shock absorption. The calcium is like the concrete poured around the rebar that gives bone its hardness. If you just pour more concrete without maintaining the steel framework, the structure becomes brittle and weak. It might look dense on a scan, but it shatters under stress. That's exactly what happens when you take calcium without the cofactors needed to properly integrate it into bone matrix. You get denser but more brittle bones that fracture more easily. But there's an even bigger problem with calcium supplements that's genuinely dangerous. When you consume large amounts of calcium without the proper cofactors to direct it into bones, that calcium has to go somewhere. And it goes into your arteries, causing calcification and stiffening that increases heart attack and stroke risk. It deposits in your joints, contributing to arthritis pain and stiffness. It accumulates in soft tissues, kidneys, and even your brain. This is called the calcium paradox. People taking calcium supplements to strengthen bones end up with calcium in all the wrong places, while their bones remain weak because the calcium isn't being properly utilized for bone building. So what's the mineral that's 10 times more effective than calcium for actual bone strength and fracture prevention? My top recommendation for patients over 60 who want genuinely strong bones is scientifically proven, but largely ignored: magnesium. Now, before you dismiss this as too simple or tell me you've never heard magnesium mentioned for bone health, let me explain exactly why magnesium is the master mineral for bone strength and why it outperforms calcium by every meaningful measure. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in your body, and at least 12 of those are directly related to bone formation, mineralization, and maintenance. First, and most critically, magnesium is required to activate vitamin D. Without adequate magnesium, your body cannot convert vitamin D into its active form, calcitriol, which is the hormone that actually enables calcium absorption from your gut and proper calcium deposition into bones. This is why people can take massive amounts of vitamin D and calcium and still have weak bones. If magnesium is deficient, vitamin D doesn't work and calcium doesn't get into bones. It's like having a key and a lock but no oil in the mechanism. Nothing functions properly. But magnesium does something even more remarkable. It directly stimulates the hormone calcitonin, which pulls calcium out of your soft tissues and bloodstream and deposits it into bones where it belongs. Calcitonin is essentially the traffic director for calcium, making sure it goes to bones instead of arteries, joints, and organs. When magnesium is adequate, calcitonin functions optimally, actively removing dangerous calcium deposits from soft tissues while simultaneously strengthening bones. This is why magnesium doesn't just build bones, it protects your cardiovascular system at the same time. Studies show that people with optimal magnesium intake have both stronger bones and just healthier, more flexible arteries because calcium is being properly directed. Magnesium is also essential for parathyroid hormone regulation. Your parathyroid glands control calcium metabolism, releasing parathyroid hormone when blood calcium is low to pull calcium from bones into the bloodstream. In magnesium deficiency, parathyroid hormone becomes dysregulated, causing excessive calcium to be pulled from bones even when dietary calcium is adequate. Your bones get weaker, while blood calcium paradoxically increases, depositing in all the wrong places. Correcting magnesium deficiency normalizes parathyroid function, stopping this harmful calcium drain from bones. But here's where magnesium becomes 10 times more powerful than calcium for bone strength. Magnesium directly affects bone quality, not just bone density. Most bone density tests measure how much mineral is in your bones, primarily calcium. But mineral density doesn't tell you if those bones are strong and flexible or brittle and prone to fracture. Magnesium is incorporated directly into the bone crystal structure, improving the mechanical properties of bone tissue. It makes bones more resilient, better able to absorb shock, and bend slightly under stress rather than snapping. This is why studies show that magnesium intake is more strongly correlated with fracture prevention than calcium intake. One major study found that people with the highest magnesium intake had a 44% lower risk of hip fracture compared to those with the lowest intake, even when calcium intake was similar between groups. Magnesium also supports the collagen matrix that forms the structural framework of bone. It's a cofactor for enzymes that produce and cross-linked collagen fibers, creating the flexible scaffold that calcium mineralizes. Without adequate collagen, bones become chalky and brittle, like old dried-out concrete that crumbles icily. With optimal magnesium and healthy collagen, bones maintain flexibility and shock absorption that prevents fractures, even from falls that would shatter magnesium-deficient bones. And here's something most doctors don't realize. Up to 75% of people over 60 are deficient in magnesium, while most are getting adequate or even excessive calcium from diets and supplements. The modern Western diet is extremely high in calcium from fortified foods, dairy, and supplements, but very low in magnesium because magnesium-rich foods like leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and whole grains have been displaced by processed foods. We have a massive magnesium deficiency epidemic combined with calcium excess, which is the perfect storm for weak, brittle bones combined with arterial calcification. This is why osteoporosis rates have continued climbing, even as calcium supplement use has skyrocketed. We've been focused on the wrong mineral. Now let's talk about what the actual research shows, because this isn't just theory. The Framingham Osteoporosis Study, one of the longest-running bone health studies, found that magnesium intake was a stronger predictor of bone mineral density than calcium intake in elderly men and women. Another study specifically compared calcium supplementation to magnesium supplementation in postmenopausal women with osteoporosis. After 12 months, the magnesium group showed significant increases in bone mineral density and decreases in bone turnover markers, indicating reduced bone breakdown, while the calcium group showed minimal improvement. Most remarkably, fracture rates were 60% lower in the magnesium group over the 2-year follow-up period. A groundbreaking study from the Journal of the American Geriatric Society tracked over 3,000 adults for 7 years and found that higher dietary magnesium intake was associated with higher bone mineral density at the hip and whole body, while calcium intake showed no significant correlation once magnesium was accounted for. The researchers concluded that magnesium may be more important than calcium for skeletal health in aging populations. And here's what I see consistently in my practice. My patients over 60, 70, even 80, who increase their magnesium intake through food and appropriate supplementation while reducing or eliminating calcium supplements, they're the ones who show improvements on bone density scans, report fewer aches and pains because calcium is leaving their joints, and most importantly, they're the ones who don't fracture when they have minor falls or accidents. They tell me their bones feel stronger, their muscles work better because magnesium supports muscle function, and they have more energy because magnesium is essential for cellular energy production. Now you might be thinking, Doctor, how much magnesium do I need? And what are the best sources? For bone health in adults over 60, I recommend 400 to 500 milligrams of magnesium per day for men and 320 to 400 milligrams for women. Most people are getting only 200 to 250 milligrams from diet, so there's a significant gap to fill. The best food sources of magnesium are dark leafy greens like spinach, Swiss chard, and kale, providing 75 to 150 milligrams per cooked cup. Nuts and seeds, particularly pumpkin seeds, almonds, and cashews, provide 75 to 150 milligrams per quarter cup. Legumes like black beans and lentils provide 60 to 120 milligrams per cup. Whole grains like quinoa and brown rice provide 80 to 120 milligrams per cup. Dark chocolate, 70% cacao or higher, provides about 65 milligrams per ounce. Avocados provide about 60 milligrams each. If you're going to supplement, and many people over 60 should because dietary intake is often insufficient, choose magnesium glycinate or magnesium citrate, which are highly absorbable and gentle in the stomach. Avoid magnesium oxide, which is poorly absorbed and mainly works as a laxative. Start with 200 to 300 milligrams per day with food and increase gradually if needed. The only caution is if you have kidney disease, in which case you need medical supervision because impaired kidneys can't excrete excess magnesium properly. Here's the critical point about calcium. I'm not saying never consume calcium. Calcium is still necessary for bones, but you need far less than you've been told, and you absolutely need it in the right ratio with magnesium. The ideal calcium to magnesium ratio is about 2 to 1 or even 1 to 1. Most people are getting 5 to 1 or even 10 to 1 from excessive calcium with insufficient magnesium. Get your calcium from food sources like leafy greens, sardines with bones, sesame seeds, and moderate dairy if you tolerate it well. These foods provide calcium along with magnesium and other cofactors and natural ratios that your body can use properly. Stop taking isolated calcium supplements unless you have a diagnosed deficiency confirmed by blood tests, which is rare. You also need adequate vitamin D3, at least 2,000 to 4,000 IU daily for most seniors. And vitamin K2, about 100 to 200 micrograms daily to work synergistically with magnesium. Vitamin D enables calcium absorption. Magnesium activates vitamin D and directs calcium into bones. And vitamin K2 activates proteins that bind calcium to bone matrix. This is the complete bone building system that actually works. So if you're over 60 and serious about building genuinely strong bones that resist fractures, about protecting your cardiovascular system from calcium deposits, and about addressing the real mineral deficiency that's undermining your bone health, then starting today, stop taking calcium supplements. Instead, focus on getting 400 to 500 milligrams of magnesium daily from food and supplements. Eat magnesium-rich foods like leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and legumes every single day. Add a quality magnesium supplement if needed. Get adequate vitamin D3 and K2. Do this consistently for 6 months and watch what happens to your bone density, your joint pain, your muscle function, and your overall vitality. If this just saved you from unnecessary calcium supplements and gave you the real solution to bone strength, subscribe for more evidence-based strategies that challenge conventional wisdom. Comment below. Are you ready to prioritize magnesium over calcium for your bones? Let's build a community of seniors with genuinely strong bones.